What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Genesis. Welcome back to the channel. This video, we're gonna go over two separate methods on how you can turn regular skinny jeans into this nice, bold, stylish look. We're gonna go over the pros and cons of each method. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna jump right into this video. Waste no time. Let's go. Yes, you heard me correctly. We got two methods. So method one, I'm just gonna call them full flares. Method two, I'm gonna call them single flares. I did make up this terminology, okay? So if there is real terms for this, just let me know in the comments. Now the full flares will affect the front and back rise, but it will give you a more boot cut, baggier kind of vibe. If that's what you're going for, go for that method. If you already like the fit of your jeans and you just want to add a flare and or an outside flare, then you have to do the single method. Step one, you're gonna take the jeans you want to add the flare to. You're gonna open up those hems. You can use a seam ripper, razor, whatever you want to do. Just open up those hems, don't touch anything else, and just iron that flat so we can get accurate measurements. Then you're gonna grab your donor denim or fabric, whatever you're using for this flare, because we're gonna start measuring up and cutting. In this case, I'm using some donor denim. These are for DEPOP, so these are just simple jeans. Get the most amount of fabric out this donor denim. I'm cutting the inseam all the way, and then I'm just gonna cut through the back of the jeans and open up both sides. This way we can utilize the most amount of fabric as possible. So once you figure out what measurements you wanna use, just account for the seam allowance. For example, I want an 11-inch flare, so I'm just gonna mark 12 inches to give myself some room, for the seam allowance. Next, you're gonna measure right in between that, so the center of that line you just created. So if you're doing single flares, this is when I usually go up 20 inches high to 15 inches high. You could really make your own measurements, like I said, but I suggest around 20 to 15 inches up. In this case, I'm using 15 inches. Now this is important. Do a ½ an inch on each side of that center line at the top. And then finally connect those points together, creating that triangle. Then you're gonna cut it out and repeat those same steps. Or you could just use the flare you already cut out as a template, because we need another one for the other side of the pant leg. And if you're doing the outside seam flare as well, you're just gonna repeat those steps. Now, if you're doing the full flare method, make sure those hems are laid out so we can measure the full length we need to make these flares. Once it's ironed, you're gonna look at the inseam and then measure from the hem all the way to the crotch seam. In this case, mine was like 33 inches, but I made it 34 just to have extra seam allowance for when we sew these pieces together. Then for the top of that center line, you could choose whatever length you want. If you want to add to the rise, you can, but I just did 2 inches. Then you're going to repeat that for the other side. Just like I said, you could use the one as a template and just cut it out. Now we have 2 flare sets, but we're going to sew these together to make it one full piece. To do that, you can either do a flat felt seam, or you could put the good sides together, clip it up, and then just do a single stitch and then serge it up. All right, now we got these flare sets done, ready to go. Now I like to use the seam ripper, but you can just take those fabric scissors and just cut along that inseam or outseam. Now for the single flares, it's up to you. You can cut that whole seam or seam rip that whole entire inseam, or you could just seam rip to the length of your flare set. For example, mine was 15 inches long, so I would just seam rip up to 15 inches on that inseam. Me personally, I just seam rip the whole thing so I could just start fresh. I suggest ironing at this step, so you could just make sure everything's flat before we pin it up, and then turn your main denim inside out. Ripping up that serge, it should be inside out anyway, but just keep it inside out. Once everything's good and ready to go, this is when we can pin or clip the fabric. It's up to you using pins or clips. And if you're doing the full flare method, just make sure those seams are aligning from your flare and main denim. Now it's important to remember to pin this inside out. You don't want anything laying the wrong way and you getting mad. You have to seam rip it. So especially on that flare, because depending on what material you use, it can look the same inside or outside. So just look, make sure everything's good, then pin or clip that flare set up. Now we're gonna get into sewing. First, we're gonna do a single stitch. Also, make sure you're using the right needle for your fabric. If you're into this, then it's always good to research. Make sure you have the correct tension in between 3 and 4. And the length is up to you. I'm just using the 2. Now I'm using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're gonna start sewing. Now take your time, stretch that fabric. If you're new to this, just take it slow, take those pins and clips out as you go. If you're doing the full flares, just make sure those seams are aligning as well. And for the single flare, you're just going up to that shorter flare set and creating that point. This is why I said it's important to do that ½ an inch on each side of that flare set, because that's gonna create the most perfect point on this piece. And if you ended up seam ripping the whole entire inseam, then just leave the rest of it for later, because it's going to be easier to zigzag stitch it or serge it beforehand, and then you can just worry about that finishing up. Once you successfully single stitch that, this is when we're gonna start serging this up, or zigzag stitch if you don't have a serger. This just stops it from fraying after washing it and being worn out. If you're using a zigzag stitch, just make sure you cut the frayed ends before you start. If you cut the fabric though, instead of using the seam ripper, you might not have this problem. Also with a zigzag stitch, to make it more durable, you can backstitch with a single stitch and then just switch the settings back to zigzag. And then once you end that stitch again, just backstitch with a single stitch. I felt like I just read a riddle or something. So if you did the full flares, you're done. If you did the single flares, now just sew up the middle, make sure those seams align. Just do the same thing, single stitch, then zigzag or serge. We're still not done yet. We still got 2 steps, and this is very, very important. A lot of people ask me this on a daily, actually. They ask me how to get the flares basically one with the piece, if that makes sense. And I always tell them iron, iron, iron. I bet they'll vouch in the comments. Iron those seams up, man.
All right, for example, this is the main denim, this is the flare. Watch what happens when I simply flip this seam in and out. See that? It starts to bubble up. Imagine your whole seam was flipped the wrong way. The whole flare would be bubbled up. Make sure it's facing the main part of the denim to make that flat transition.
The easiest way to make sure these seams are laying right is to just flip it inside out and then stretch the fabric so only the flare is on top and exposed. Stretch it out. Make sure it's in that triangle pattern. Just hit it with that iron. Go crazy with that iron. Make sure everything's flat. Literally the whole flare is flat. And now for the final step, we're going to hem this up. It's optional, obviously, but we're going to hem these up. And, you know, all that hard work you just did, making sure those seams are facing the right direction. Keep them in that direction once you do that double fold on that hem. And then just start hemming up. You know, you can iron it to make it easier for you, for those thicker parts, you know. You can even mallet or hammer those ends down if you really need to. But yeah, you're just gonna sew those up and then it's all completed, man. If this video helped out in any way, let me know in the comments below. Here's some other examples of different flare patterns, different sizes of flares that I did. I hope you guys understand it takes a while to make these videos, but I really do enjoy it. I got tote bags as well that I just made. Let me know if you want a video on that, and I got y'all. With that being said, we're gonna be out. I'll see you in the next video, and then giveaway on the next video. It's only the Genesis, man. We out.